My name is Kate Jones, and I am interviewing Dorothy Frances Robinson Jones, my mother, who served in the Navy from 1942 to 1945. And this interview is taking place in Fresno, California, in my mother's home. This interview is being recorded for the Women in Military Service for American Memorial Foundation's Oral History Program. So Dorothy, hello.
Hello.
So we're here today to just get a nice history of your family background, and particularly as it relates to, and your history of serving in the military and what that's meant to you, how it's impacted your life. And so I have a series of questions to ask.
I'm ready to answer.
So would you just say your full name for the record, please?
My name is Dorothy Frances Robinson Jones. I married a naval officer whose name was Shannon Jones. And I am, at the moment, 95 years old.
That's right.
God.
And you were how old when you entered the military?
I was like 21.
About 21.
Well, 21, 22. 1942. That would have been, I was 22.
22. Right. Because you were born in 1920.
Yeah.
So tell us, Mom, in what town and where were you born? When and where were you born?
I was born in Lancaster, South Carolina, where I lived until I got second grade. We moved to a little town called Rockhill, South Carolina, which is just south of Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's where I grew up until I was of the age we just were stumbling over a while ago, 21, 22. When I went into the Navy, that was my life in that small town.
In Rockhill, South Carolina. Rockhill. And what's the date of your birth?
November 29th, 1920.
Exactly. So, Mom, talk a little bit about your parents. What were their names? Where were they from? And what did they do for a living?
My parents were John P. Robinson. My mother was Beulah Hardin before she married my father, John P. They had 3 children before I was born. They had 3 boys, 2 years apart, every 2 years.
They had 3 boys.
3 boys, and then I came along, and 2 years later, a sister came along, and then finally another brother. So that was 6 children, which was a lot.
What did your dad do for a living?
My father was a barber. He cut hair and shaved people. My mother never worked.
She was a stay-at-home mom.
She was a stay-at-home because women just didn't have the jobs to do unless you were a nurse or something along that line.
Right. And had either of your parents, Mom, or other family members served in World War I?
Yeah. My father was in World War I. He was in the cavalry. And I remember seeing a picture of him riding the horse when he was in the cavalry.
Up on that horse? And
he never served out of the United States. I think it was back in Kansas or someplace. He rode that dumb horse.
And you told me once that on that picture you could see he had the leggings. His calves were wrapped in the leggings.
Oh, that's the way they dressed then. They were called puttees, I think. Puttees. And they wrapped around the legs up to the knee.
And did your dad ever talk to you about his years in the cavalry?
Not really. He wasn't, because he didn't actually see in his service as such. He was never embroiled in any kind of military fighting. He never went to France or any place else.
And how about you know, on the Harden side, on your mother's side of the family, did any of those boys, those cousins, were they in World War One?
One of my mother's brothers, that would be Uncle Hobson, was in the I'm moving again. Was in the army a while.
In World War
But he,
One.
like my dad, he never went abroad. Just the training he had, and then the war didn't last that long. You know, World War One
Right.
was over in,
Wasn't it 14 to 17?
I think so, somewhere along there.
And you had a story to tell about your aunt who married a war hero.
Oh, that was Aunt Sally. My Aunt Sally married a military man. He was an officer.
In World War
I
One.
don't remember if he was a lieutenant or what, but his name was Kinzer, Jim Kinzer, Kinzer, and he did fight in the war with Germany. And when he came home at the end of the war, he brought 2 of those authentic German helmets, you know, with the point that goes up to the top. Really, they would have been wonderful things to have kept. By that time, my mother had these 3 little boys, and he gave them those helmets to play with.
Wow.
And in their exuberant childhood, they ruined those German helmets, which would have been worth something today and been something to be proud of to have kept.
Those would be the Kaiser Wilhelm
Oh yeah, that's what.
helmets. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I understand that. I remember that point, seeing it in movies. Talk a little bit about your siblings.
Oh my
We
gosh.
know you were one of 6 children, but talk about your siblings, and did any of your siblings serve other than yourself in the military? And how was that?
Yes. 3 of my brothers served in the military. The oldest brother did not. He was older and was married, and he did not choose to go into the military. He worked in a war building ships. That's what he did in North Carolina.
In North Carolina?
They turned out ships like crazy. But my second oldest brother went into the Air Force, and then my brother just
And
older than I.
what was his name? What was his name?
Well, his name was John P. Robinson Jr., but he always had the nickname of Ikey. He was called Ikey forever, and he still was. And then my brother, just older than I, went into the Navy, and he served aboard a ship. And incidentally, when I was stationed in Hawaii during the war, during the fight, his ship came into Pearl Harbor, and I had the permission to go up there and visit with him during the time his ship was in Pearl Harbor, and that was quite a thing.
Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, that was, of course, the danger was over by then, but you could still see the results of the bombing and the battleships that were sunken.
Sure.
Then my youngest
and the
brother.
name of the second brother?
Pardon me?
Give us the name of that brother.
Oh, his name was Harry Robinson. And then my youngest brother, Jack, told a bunch of lies and went into the Marine Corps when he was just 17.
Wow.
And he really served in some strange things in the landings in Saipan and Guadalcanal. He saw some really ugly stuff. Ugly.
He was in some of the bigger
was.
battles and invasions.
He was.
Yeah.
Saw some of his buddies killed. And
Did he talk about that with you?
he didn't talk about it very much, but it sort of led him into, he became alcohol dependent for a while. Finally got over it, but I believe it was due to the memories he had of the landings and seeing so much destruction and death.
Yeah, so much loss
Yes,
of life.
yes.
And
So
how about, on that note, how about Ikey? Because
Ikey had a good time.
Ikey went into the Air Force.
He went into the Air Force, and he was a bombardier, and he was stationed finally in India.
Wow.
And they flew what was called the hump. They flew over
Isn't it Burma? Burma.
China, Burma, India. That's where they were. But he was never in any actual danger or fighting as such. And I think he had a pretty good time.
Was he trained as, what role was he trained to do on the airplane?
Well, bombardier, where you sit
Bombardier.
up there and you look through a thing and you see where you drop the bombs
That's
down
right.
there.
But as far as you know, he never saw active.
Well, he was never shot at, or I don't think he ever he went through the training, of course, like I say. He was trained at the same time, what was his name?
Clark Gable.
Clark Gable went through his training in Florida, and my brother Ikey was in the same training group that he was in.
Yep.
And they all admired Clark Gable so much because he was older. But he also went through all that training, and it wasn't easy. They had some of the difficulties they went through. But he handled it beautifully, and then he ended up, of course, making movies for the war effort.
Clark Gable did it, and it's an amazing thing to see that your brother Ikey was extremely handsome in a manly way, like you would think Clark Gable would be. Yeah.
Oh, he was his model. He thought he looked like him, and he did. Actually,
he actually did. And then you had your sister. So
yeah, Becky.
And Becky was married.
She was married to a. He was in the. What was it called?
The Merchant Marines.
No. No.
Becky married Buck, and
Buck was already in the National Guard. That was it.
Uh-huh.
He was in the National Guard, and they were called up immediately.
Uh-huh.
And away he went. And
this
he
is
was
1941.
Well, that was in he was in the German thing, and he was the Battle of the Bulge and the whole.
So Buck went, and his name was what?
Boland.
Buck.
Bolin.
And what was his? Do you remember his name? Buck was his nickname.
Well, John W. Boland was his name, and he had a rough time in the war too. He came home with a problem.
He came home with a problem.
Alcoholic problem.
Yeah.
A lot of. Yep.
And did Buck ever talk about it?
He talked to me. He and I would sit there with a scotch in front of us, and he would tell me his history of what he went through there, and some of it was pretty hair-raising.
Mm-hmm. But he wouldn't tell his wife, your sister?
Well, she listened to it, too. She had to know what happened, too, as much as possible.
It's nice to know he could talk about it.
That he got home safely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Physically safely.
And so all your siblings were married? Or did they all marry?
Oh, eventually they were all married. These two, Harry in the Navy and Jack in the Marines, they didn't get married until after I did. Mm-hmm. But I came home in 1945, I think.
Uh-huh.
And it was during that time I was working for the Veterans Administration. Excuse me. And I met your father, who was a naval commander at the time, but of course he was out of the military if the war was over. But he had a much higher rating than I did, let us say.
Yeah, we're going to get to that story because that's an interesting story about the Veterans Administration in Stockton, California. Just going back a little bit, Mom, talk about where you grew up and what it was like growing up there.
Well, heavenly days. I was born at the end of the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. And everybody, as we used to say, we was poor. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the Depression, jobs were very scarce. Incomes were very scarce. And we were used to getting along without a whole lot. But most of the people were. Mm-hmm. And actually it took the war coming along to pull the country out of those Depression years and make jobs plentiful, and the way of life improved after the war was over, of course.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president during the 1929 crash and the Depression.
He was the first president I remember. And he's the one who made the talk after Pearl Harbor was bombed and declared war.
I know he's the president of the war years, but I can't remember who was president during the Depression years prior to that.
Harding and...
I know Calvin Coolidge was in...
Oh, now let's go back to George Washington.
No, Calvin Coolidge, when you were... Because he was president during the 20s.
Calvin Coolidge. That's before I knew there was such a thing as a government or a president or Washington, D.C. But during the war, when FDR and Eleanor, his wife, who was the most wonderful woman that ever... She was great.
She inspired the people, didn't she?
Oh, she did.
Yeah. Talk a little more about growing up in Rockhill and your mom, Beulah. How did church play in your life as a...
Well, we were very church-going people. Baptist people. Boy, you were in the Bible Belt back there. And we all went to church. My mother taught Sunday school. My mother played the piano for the church for us to sing. And we didn't miss much church training when I was a child.
So you 6 kids, that's what you did Sunday morning?
Well, the boys, my brothers got old enough and stopped going. As soon as they realized they could sneak away, they didn't go anymore. But the younger ones of us, I was going to church right on up until I went into the Navy.
Because it was also socially gratifying to go to church.
It's about the only game in town, you might say. There was very little to do except what you socially built around the church and the school.
And what church was that you went to?
The First Baptist Church in Rockhill, South Carolina.
Is that church still there?
Of course it is.
All right. What about the schools? Still thinking about your growing up years, Mom. What were the schools?
Oh, Lord, that, of course, was long before segregation. I mean, it was fine. And I was the smartest kid you could ever imagine. I really was. I was smart. And I was very athletic. So I had no problems. Only thing, I was homely as a mud fence. So I did not set the world on fire with being a little cutesy Miss cheerleader and all that sort of thing. But I beat the heck out of all the boys playing tennis and all that sort of thing. And really and truly, I was pretty brainy.
And you, that was certainly your grade school and your high school.
Yes, as far as I went. I was never able to go on to college, which is what I wanted to do, but financially we were unable. We didn't have all the loans and the grants and things that the kids are able to apply for now.
Right.
And it was just, and I had to go to work because you had to help support the family as you got old enough. And I don't want to talk about that anymore.
No, but tell that little story about Mr. Graft and the YMCA.
Oh,
tell that little story.
Well, there's not much of a story there. We had down a building downtown. It was upstairs over the drugstore, I think. And it was the YMCA. And it had a wonderful man named Mr. O'Hare, who was the secretary of the YMCA. And he became my good friend. I could talk to him about anything. And because of his knowing me well and knowing my family, when I got to the point where I really graduated high school, there were no jobs to be had. So I worked at a little soda shop for $3 a week, and you could believe it. And I really needed a job, so he called this large printing company in my town, and he called over and talked to the manager. And told him about me, this young lady really needing work. So.
And you were in high school at that time, is that
I
right?
graduated high school.
Graduated high school.
But no college. Anyway, I went over and got this job of being a sort of a clerk in a big, I could type. I had taken typing in high school. And that's how I earned, and the job there, hey, this was a great job. I mean,
at the printing?
$13 a week.
Wow.
After that, $3 in the.
Wow.
So yeah, things happened that improved right along.
Right.
Yeah.
And what did you have YMCA stand for?
Oh, that I made something up. One night they had a meeting of the men, the businessmen in Rockhill, and it was on a night when our meeting was our weekly meeting of the girls that went to this YMCA. We were there and we were watching a movie in one room. So Mr. O'Hare came to me and he said, listen, I want you to come in and speak to the businessmen and let them know that we need all the donations we can have to run this little show here. We were just on a shoestring, had very little income. And it is the YWCA, and they should support it. And I think I had read this in a paper that I'd seen there. So I went in and I spoke to them, scared to death, absolutely scared to death. And I said, just keep this in mind. When you're making out your own budgets for the year from your business, remember, YWCA stands for You Must Come Across. That means you got to donate money to keep our business going here.
Oh,
I was a smart aleck. I was a smart aleck.
That was clever. The YMCA, You Must Come Across.
You must come across.
Pay up. Then what made you, as the war got started after Pearl Harbor, what made you decide to join the war, Mom?
Well, you got to realize that Sunday afternoon when we heard on the radio before TV, that Pearl Harbor had been attacked by the enemy and all these ships. Where in the world was Pearl Harbor? Nobody ever heard of Pearl Harbor. We didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. We didn't know what was happening. But that was, of course, in December of 41.
41. Mm-hmm.
And then things started, the president declared war on Japan. And the enlistment officers, recruiting officers, were doing a great business there for a long while.
The men just going
The men
right
flocking in there. Our country's been attacked. We are going to. Well, there was no such thing of having women in the service at all, except nurses. Mm-hmm. Of course, it had nurses. And so it was over in the summertime, late summer. There was an article in the Charlotte, North Carolina paper, which was right up across the line from Rockhill.
Yeah.
And it said that a recruiting officer would be in Charlotte at the post office to interview young women between the ages of 21 and 30 who would be interested in going into the Naval Reserve, U.S. Navy. Now, that would be the same as the boys going in. Uh-huh. This was not an auxiliary or a... It was
Right.
It was to be same as the Navy that the boys were.
You would be enlisted
but
military.
None of my brothers were in yet. But I decided to go up and find out what was going on, and I did. And I talked to...
You went to Charlotte.
Went to Charlotte. My mother went with me, and so did my sister. So we talked to them, and it sounded like a pretty interesting thing to do. You would just become trained to do jobs that would release men who've been sitting there doing work that women could do. Like what they were interested in, people that had clerical experience, who could do work in an office, typing, filing, letter writing, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And then they were thinking, too, of women who could do light hospital work, because corpsmen in the Navy worked under the nurse's supervision, and they could be. So anyway, that sounded good to me. I could type.
And what happened on that day when you and your mom and Becky went to Charlotte to hear about military? What did Becky do that day?
She kind of wanted to go too. She wanted to come into the Navy. If I did, we'd be together. But we talked to the people there at the recruiting office about it. Would we be able to go together? At that time, my sister was married. Of course, she didn't have children, and her husband was in the military. He was already overseas early on. And the ruling was that no woman would be accepted for active duty in the naval service if their husband was serving in the military. And that took care of her. Oh. Later they did. Later they changed that to where they could accept women who had husbands that served. No children. No children.
Uh-huh. Okay, great. And why was it you chose then the Navy? Was it just because you saw that advertisement, or that it happened to be Navy women enlistment, or? Well,
there was something about it that just drew me. They were already trying to find women to go in the WAAC, the WACs, which is the Army. Uh-huh. And that just never appealed to me. Their uniforms looked kind of grungy, and they were not at that time, they were not an integral part of the military. They were an auxiliary, women accepted for auxiliary, They were not WACs, they were WAACs.
Women accepted for auxiliary.
Yeah, auxiliary work. Yeah.
And Mom, what did your brothers and sister and mother think of you joining the military, and your dad?
Well, actually, I think they might have thought I was a little bit crazy because they didn't know it's something absolutely new. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people resent a little change and nobody ever said don't do it, or we don't want you to do that, because we're always raised to be independent, to do as you can do, and if you can handle it. And so they never said no, or to think about it a while, because things start moving pretty fast. And they were pretty darn proud once I got in there and got myself a little uniform and started marching around and saluting and all that good stuff.
Exactly, but there may have been a little resistance because you did it. That was a groundbreaking thing.
Yeah, women hadn't done that before.
To go into the military.
It's sort of the way some people felt recently when women went into the fighting army. Women go in now and they carry a gun and they march and they go where the danger is. That's and all that. But at that time we were told, and we believed it, and it was true, that we would not go into
harm's way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dangerous settings. So Mom,
yes,
what kind of training did you receive once you entered the service? And how was it at the beginning of your service?
Oh, well, when we were selected there from the group that were interviewed in Charlotte, and I don't know how many people went through that, but we were given aptitude tests and physical tests and we talked with the people. So I must have done pretty well because I was one of the 6 selected to go to this first training group that went to Willard College in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Out we went on a train, and we were assigned roommates that came from all parts of the country. One of my roommates, I remember, was from Racine, Wisconsin, and there were 3 of us in the one room, and one was from up there, Lake of the Woods, that Minnesota?
Sounds like.
Up there in the where it's cold. And they kidded me about being Southern and talking funny. Yeah, so we started right off becoming a group of class people, going from one class to another, learning all about naval history and naval regulations, because most of us were going to be office people and having to write letters and receive letters and file letters. And so we learned the regulations. Oh, and the nomenclature. You had to learn to call the floor the deck. The walls were bulkheads. The bathroom was the head. Oh, so we laughed. Yeah. And we marched. We learned to march. Luckily, I had had some marching training before. And it was a natural thing for me.
How did you learn to march?
Well, the Civil Air Patrol had opened a thing in Rockhill just after Pearl Harbor. So, of course, I go down and join that, too. That's just, you weren't tied up to anything. But we had fun, and we paid and had little uniforms made, and we thought we were pretty cute.
But you learned to march?
Oh, yeah, we learned to march and to give the commands. And that made me kind of head and shoulders about some of the girls, because I remember some of them were to call, we had some of the girls calling them to give them training too. So here I am, you learn to column right, column left, all this sort of thing, and you know what to do, and about face, so you look good when you're marching, you know, you stand up there straight. And one of the girls in the group wasn't quite as sure of herself as I was, so she was giving us the orders to go, and we'd go from one building in the college to another, and we came to an intersection, and instead of saying column right, column left, or whatever the one, she said, around the corner, go! So she had to learn a little more, and we finished laughing at her and finally got to our classroom.
That's hilarious. So that was your basic training, is that right?
Well, the training that we got there went on for 3 months. And we did learn quite a lot about what we would be expected to do, and that we went in for the duration of the war. We did not sign up forever or for 8 years or 4 years or whatever, for the duration of the war. But we were exactly as the boys that were recruited. Mm-hmm. Pay's the same.
Pay was the same.
Yeah.
Pay rate was the same.
The pay rate was the same. We went in as apprentice seamen. And then when we finished this 3 months, we were given a one stripe for, we were going to be yeomen, most of us. Yeomen is what the office people's rating would be. Third class, petty officers. We thought we were pretty smart. Had a thing on our sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got equal pay and all the same benefits.
All
as
the same
men.
benefits. Right away, I had an allotment sent home to my mother. They had a wonderful thing. If you needed help at home,
Financially
help at home, then the government would match the deduction from your pay. They would take, from our $50 pay, they would take $17.50 kind of rings a bell to me, and the government would match it, and there would go a bond for that amount to my mother to go in the safety deposit box, and it would accumulate it until the end of the war.
And did that happen once a month or?
Yeah, every month. Every month that went home to her.
Every month.
But I wouldn't let her cash it. I was saving the money.
Now, tell us about your first duty station. Your first active, when did you go on to active duty and what was that like?
This is kind of interesting because it saved my bacon, you might say. I always wanted to go back to Charleston, South Carolina, which is my favorite town in the whole world. But so many of these girls that were finishing the same class I was, this yeoman training, were being sent to Washington, D.C., because that's where they needed so many women to do the office work. Well, I happen to know one of the guys that was stationed out there where I was, who was handling that, because we had some regular Navy people there to help get us through this training thing. And I thought, oh golly, I would love to go to Charleston. I don't want to go to Washington, D.C. I would love to go to Charleston. And by golly, I got a call from the woman who was the CO of our base, and she told me, I don't quite understand this. And she said, your orders were all ready for you to go to Washington with so many of these other women, but yours has been pulled and you are assigned to the ONOP office in Charleston. ONOP is the Office of Naval Officer Procurement. That's where they interview men to become officers. Uh-huh. So, boy, was I happy. And so I was stationed in Charleston at the ONOP for some little while, and we decided we needed more women. This was working out pretty well. And they kind of liked the way I was working in there, and I was given recruiting duties. I would go up to a town and meet with anybody that wanted to come in, and I would interview them and give them their little test and so on. And that's what I did for about a year.
That was your first duty?
My first duty was recruiting out from Knoxville, Tennessee to Atlanta.
Asheville?
To Asheville, North Carolina, which is a wonderful town. Mm-hmm. And I did that, and suddenly after we'd been doing that over a year, another directive came out that they were going to send a selected group of women to Hawaii. Wow. And that at that time, Hawaii was not a state. Hawaii was a territory of them. And so, of course, there are a lot of men stationed there because of after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now we knew where Pearl Harbor was. So, man, I was right there getting my request in to go there. And sure enough, I got the little order that I would be ready to leave Charleston and come out to California and go through a preparation type of thing to go to Hawaii. And we were on a small ship after we had come and got shots and all that silly stuff. And we did go to Hawaii. And that was the greatest duty you could ever imagine. It was like having a year's vacation, you might say.
What is it that had you know you wanted to pick up on that offer?
Well, at that time, I was young and curious and wanted to travel and knew there was something out there in this big world other than North and South Carolina and Atlanta, Georgia. And my gosh, sailing over to Hawaii, who wouldn't turn it down?
And what did you sail on when you guys
There were 3 ships out
left
here.
San Francisco? You set sail from San Francisco?
Well, we were trained right there at this side of San Francisco. Can't remember the place.
Mare Island?
No, it was in a little bit. And we had 2 leave times to go into San Francisco. I just fell in love with San Francisco. I loved it. But where was I going with this?
How did you
there
set
3
sail?
ships. There were 3 ships that sailed between Hawaii and the mainland here. They were called the Matson Line. They were luxury ships. So they had changed this ship, this small, to moving service people around. And when we went down, there were not too many of us that were, I had a picture someplace of the ones who were, anyway, we went down and the stateroom that had been not bigger than this hallway really, had been a very luxurious stateroom for a couple. Mm-hmm. But they had taken the luxurious apartments out and put bunks in. 15 girls were in this room sleeping that were supposed for them. And our own bathroom, 1 bathroom for 15 girls. You learn to stand in line to brush your teeth and all that. But hey, we had a great time.
And how many days was the passage?
It was like 3.5 days we were on that ship, and we had blackouts at night. We were still under certain restrictions, you know. But hey, we had gotten acquainted with a bunch of real neat guys that were on the ship over on the port side of the ship. We were on the starboard side.
Oh, they separated the genders?
Well, they certainly did. I mean, after all, we were ladies, and we were over here, and the minute they it was curfew time, the boys were not. But they got smart. They learned the easiest way to get over, and we had some little lovely romantic little trysting times on that ship. Yeah.
Among those the thoughts, those reflective thoughts, what else can you say about your vivid memories? What are your vivid memories of your time in the military? What stands out as your most vivid memories?
I think it was the people I got acquainted with. I really met you remember I've told you about my girlfriend, roommate, Connie, from out here. I was so impressed with the girls we had so much in common. And I think that impressed me more than anything because we stayed in touch for so many. Remember, that's been 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, 70
Most of them are gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was the people, really.
It was the people and the organization. I've always been impressed with efficiency and organization, and that's what you got when you were in the military. The same is on this trip we just took to Washington, D.C. Are we going to get around to that later?
Yes, we're getting there. Yes.
Seeing how this trip is called the honor flight, where they took the military people to Washington, D.C., 61 of us, or 62 or something. Only a 3-day trip, but that was so beautifully planned.
That was the last 3 days of September.
That's right, just recently.
This year, 2016.
And to see how that was, every minute was planned. Every minute was planned. We almost missed getting on the bus to go to something because we overslept one morning. Anyway, that was a result of the war and the military and having gone into it
and World War II.
Stuck around and lasted this long. Mm-hmm. There's not too many of World War II people left, men or women.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm really grateful that we can do this history.
Yes.
It's tremendous, Mother. And I'm just thinking, with where you started there in small town Rockhill, you basically knew North and South Carolina, maybe Georgia. Your world changed because of your experiences in the military, and the geographic world opened up to you in a new way.
Oh yes.
So talk a little bit about when you transitioned back to civilian life. I know you were inspired by Connie, your friendship with Connie, and you were making plans. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, at that time, at the end of World War II, of course, we had Japan to get back on its feet. They had bombed the heck out of Japan, and the people were the country was, as you would say, it's going to hell and gone. Anyway, we knew we were going to have the reconstruction of Japan. So my roommate Connie and I, lived out here, we decided we would apply and maybe go back there. Neither of us had gotten married at the meantime. To go back and be there for the reconstruction of Japan.
And would that be within the military?
No. That would be strictly a civilian type of job. And you would be on your own. And of course, you're paid, the salary was good. And there'd be housing there and all that sort of thing.
That would be a federal job?
Yeah, it would a government type of employment. Mm-hmm. And so I came out with that idea. I came out here in August of 1947.
7, huh?
Yeah, 1947. And I was working, like I say, for the Veterans Administration. I transferred on my Veterans Administration
Back
job.
in Rockhill?
From Rockhill, we had a small office there, out to the one in Stockton.
Uh-huh.
And when I went down to apply for this transfer, across the desk from me sat this handsome young man, not all that young, but not that, a little bit older than I was. And I was so impressed with him. And we talked about the work I was doing for the VA. And yes, indeed, there was an opening there for someone with my experience. And I'll come and take that job. I told him, I said, now I'm thinking of just being here till Christmas because my roommate and I are thinking of going to Japan to work. Oh, that sounds interesting. That really sounds, well, at Christmas time, instead of going on to Japan, I was getting engaged to this person across the desk from me who became your father.
So Dad interviewed you, actually.
Oh, yeah, he interviewed me. I was Miss Robinson to him for quite a while.
Ms. Robinson, and were you his secretary?
No, I worked in the medical department, but my office and my desk was not any further than 10, 20 feet from his big. He had the big office. He was manager of the office. Mm-hmm. He was big noise. I was a simple little.
He was big noise. And so, Mom, when you came back to civilian life, were you treated any differently because you had served in the military when you came home? And tell us about coming home. I mean, you got discharged somewhere, and did you go back to Rockhill? What happened?
Of course, I went back home.
Where did you get discharged?
I was homesick. I was discharged in Tennessee. Someplace in Tennessee. I've got my honorable discharge papers and all that around here someplace.
And you came home from Hawaii on a ship?
Came back to San Francisco.
On a ship?
On a ship, yeah. We didn't fly at all. We were on ships. And we came back on a hospital ship. And they had quite a few guys that were hurt or injured or plain sick with malaria or whatever. Wow. On that ship. But when we got off the ship, we were met with a bus and taken Shoemaker, California. That's what it was. It was a base south inland. And that's where we were while we were processed out. But since I was from the south, I was sent to this place in Tennessee where I got my discharge papers and my piddling little $300 separation thing and my ticket back to Charlotte, where I started from, and the war was over.
Ticket
so I went
on a bus?
Huh?
Did you go on a bus?
On train.
Shoemaker
from Shoemaker, California, to it wasn't Knoxville, Tennessee,
but to Tennessee
on a train.
A train. Have you ever been on a train before?
Well, sure. I came out on a train.
Oh, you came out on a train.
Yeah. I had a picture of me.
Oh, yeah. You came out on a train and went back to where you were discharged.
Flying was not quite as common as it is now.
How did you get to Charlotte?
On the bus. From where? From Rockhill?
From where you were discharged in Tennessee.
Oh, that's on the train.
Oh, train from Tennessee to Charlotte.
Yes. I got quite well acquainted with trains.
I just never asked you that before. Yeah. So were you treated, so there you are, you're in Charlotte. How do you get home to Rockhill?
Well, I'm from Charlotte, Rockhill. It's only 25 miles. So the bus ran home. My folks were there to meet me, and oh boy, Dot's home. That's great. Everybody's back to normal now. And my brothers came home about the same time. And most everybody went back to the jobs they left. Uh-huh. And that's when I got into the VA that's opened. We're planning to open a Veterans Administration office in Rockhill to take care of the returning veterans, servicemen. And that's what I went down and got that job for, because it got me out of that place where you're sitting in a great, big, huge, doing the same type of work that 5 girls straight across from you.
Right.
And so many of my friends had gotten married during the meantime and had babies in the meantime.
women friends who had not gone into the military.
Oh, yeah, the ones that stayed home, most of them had gotten married or some had left the area. Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up out here.
Well, how long did you stay in Rockhill before you came out?
Just several months. It wasn't all that long, really. Because like I told you, Connie and I were planning to go to Japan.
Right.
And that's in civilian life. And we got home, I think it was in February, the end of 1945, February or March. And by August, I was out here meeting Shannon, your father.
In 45?
In 45.
So when did you leave Rockhill?
You mean to come out and change my boat? Well, I was back there until 47. The war was over in 45. So I was back there working for the Veterans Administration and stuff like that. Then in 1947, I came out here with the idea of going on to Japan and working. And that's when I met Shannon Jones, who was the office manager of this VA office in Stockton. And we started dating. Although we didn't think anybody in the office knew that we were going out. He called me on the phone after we'd had our first interview. Miss Robinson, I understand you were in the Navy. And, yes, sir, I was. I wonder, we're opening a new office, Navy, some kind of thing, in Stockton Saturday. Wondered if you'd be interested in going with me. Well, yes. So I trotted down and bought a new dress and went to that with him. And then we decided it would be fun to go and play tennis. He and I both like to play tennis. He and I like to have Chinese food. That's about all we ever had in common, actually. No, I'm kidding there. Anyway, that was in 47. And at Christmas time then, instead of going on to Japan like I'd planned, we were getting engaged. And we were married in March. So that met him in August, got engaged in December, married in March. That's what things move at a pretty fast clip when you get going with it.
So you got married in 1948.
Yes, right. And then it was 2 years later we had Becky.
And then your family got
1950.
started.
Yep.
Did you decide to take advantage of the GI Bill?
No, I did not. I should have gone on to college before coming out here, because I could have gone to college under the GI Bill. But I was gung-ho to do something more interesting, going to Japan, and then even more interesting getting married, and then even more interesting starting a family. So here I am, a very uneducated, uncultured.
But that crossed your mind. You thought about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, because that's what I was talking other people into doing when I was working there in the Veterans Administration. Can I tell a quick little story?
Yeah, quick story.
This is in Rockhill now, this little southern town. And people would come in there with it, and we'd, help them get copies made of their discharge papers, or help them apply for college training, or keeping their insurance going and all that sort of thing. And one day these two frisky little black ex-soldiers, two veterans, came prancing into the office, and I said, "Hello, can I help you with this?" Remember, this is in the South. And this boy said, "We want our rights." And I said, "You want what?" He said, "We want our rights." And I said, "What kind of rights are we talking about?" I said, do you want to go to college, or No, we don't want to go to college. But we want our rights. And by that time, my boss man, who was running the office, came by, and I said, "Maybe you better go in here and talk to Mr. Henderson." And so I listened, and he was talking. They were saying the same thing to him. They just been told before they left, before they were discharged, that they had the same rights that any of those white veterans had, and they were going to demand their rights. And he said, "Well, we're all veterans around here too." So he said, "I'm a veteran. He said, the young lady out there at the desk is a veteran. He said, she do. So we laughed, and we laughed. So that, I don't know if the boys ever ended up with their rots or not, but it was a funny little story. And that's it.
Have you used any of your VA benefits?
No, I never applied for anything. I got a job, went to work. Your father did his naval insurance. He kept his naval insurance type of thing. And then he transferred it into another insurance policy that carried on. And I am still getting a monthly stipend from that.
From, therefore, the military and via Daddy's veteran service, but
it still pays off if you let it. Not a whole lot. Never get rich off it, but it's better than.
Well, you were telling us then how life unfolded pretty rapidly. You know, once you'd left the military. But what else do you want to say about your life since the military?
Oh, good heavens, Kathy. Mostly it was wrapped up raising 4 children, which was the greatest thing I ever did in my whole life. Of everything, as I look back over that busy 300 years I've been on this earth, the relationship, having my children and having them grow up, seeing them develop into their own individual persons, that tops anything I ever did. And I will be eternally grateful to the good Lord for sending me the 4 that he did. Of course, your father had something to do with it.
And who are your children?
Oh.
What are their names?
The oldest one is the one that was born 2 years after I was married. That is Becky, Rebecca. Rebecca married Tom Gilpin after she finished college. And they've been married 45 years. And they have the most wonderful, loving relationship. They're just like they were when they were married 45 years ago. And I am so grateful for Tom. He's the neatest son-in-law anybody could ever have. And they get along wonderfully well. I have another daughter, Kathy.
And did Tom serve in the military?
Yeah, Tom served he was in the was it Vietnamese? Yeah, the Vietnamese War thing. A lot younger than we were. So, and he's a veteran now, but he's not a World War II veteran. And they're getting, as the World War II veterans are getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. There's not as many of us left. Now the Vietnamese and the ones that came, it seems like we've been in war of one kind or another ever since then. And then the women went in and they became the same as the men were, which is another story which I don't like to get into because sometimes people's going to pick me up.
So that's your firstborn daughter.
That was my firstborn.
And what did she do for a living, just for...
She was a nurse. That's all she ever did. She knew she wanted to be a nurse forever. So she got her nurse training, and then she became a nurse practitioner, which is the next thing between an RN and a doctor. And every family needs a nurse in it because we run to Becky when something goes wrong anyway. And she's a wonderful addition to the family. Although they never had children, never will. They decided that before they got married. Neither of them wanted a family. So that's worked out well for them. And Kathy is my second one, born 2 years younger. And she was a dancer, and she went to, she took quite a bit of dance training here at Fresno State, wherever she happened to be. And she went to Europe and went to school in Switzerland for a while and did some advanced dancing. And I visited her when she was in Switzerland, and that was great. And now she has her own business in San Francisco, and she does mind-body relationships. She does a lot of counseling and coaching. That's the word I have trouble with. And she stays busy, busy, busy. But luckily, being so close, she comes back to Fresno often. And I love it when she does. Mary Ann is the third daughter. And she worked for an insurance, after she finished Fresno State. She worked for an insurance place in San Francisco and did extremely well. And she was vice president of the unit she was with.
California Casualty.
California Casualty. And California Casualty decided to move to Colorado Springs. And Mary Ann could have gone and kept her lofty position. But during the interim, she had bought a home in the Bay Area, and had established a lovely relationship with a partner, and she decided to stay there. And she stayed there, and she is working for a couple of hospitals there, doing well.
Hospital.
She loves what she's doing, and she's very smart. And that brings us up to the fourth member, which is Shannon. And he, too, went to Fresno State. He got a master's degree in something or other.
English.
In English. Then he worked in Sacramento in the government with our lieutenant governor, worked in his office. And his name was Leo McCarthy. I remember that. And he learned a lot about government work. But he also got interested in computer work, which was just beginning to flare. And he worked for Bill Gates. And he picked up another master's degree in computer science. And he worked for Bill Gates, made a lot of money, and went with another company that was a startup company. And then he ended up in San Diego, developing and rebuilding a great big enormous house that he lives in. Never married, but he's had 2 or 3 interesting relationships, going through the third one right now, I understand. That's about all I better say about Shannon.
Wonderful, Mom. What did it mean for you, Mom, to serve your country?
Are you back to the military now? Well, it was just a thing I was called upon to do. It was the thing to do. Our country was in war. Our country had been attacked. And we had to get them out of there. And it wasn't, I never saw the ugly part of war. But I know from the time we dropped our bombs on Hiroshima, I was in Hiroshima several years ago, and I saw the result of that, the first bomb that was dropped on anything, and to see what that can do to a country and to a people. I don't like Germany. The war with Germany was when
Did you have more of a thought there about Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Well, I just think if that's the way we have to solve a disagreement with a country, there are better ways of doing it. I don't know why I haven't seen too many examples of it with our government going and sitting down over a table and discussing things with their leaders. We are fresh out of good. Now, I like Obama. I like our current president. I don't know what's going to happen after this. I hope our next president will be able to keep our heads above water.
And safe, hopefully.
And safe.
So when for instance, Mom, when we did go on that honor flight and so much emphasis was placed, we went on that the 26th, 7th, and 8th of April, didn't we, this year? And there was the Brigadier General in Washington, D.C., and there were these magnificent monuments showing the price of freedom, essentially showing the price of a democracy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
How does that stir you, or how does that live in you? That sense that, you know, that slogan that's on the Korean War Memorial that says, you know, freedom isn't free.
Mm-hmm.
Say something about that.
Well, of course, that is true. And we've known that in our country since the Revolutionary War. We get our first freedom from the English that had sent us, that we snuck away from and came over and started building things. No, freedom is not, it's not cheap. It's not cheap financially. It's not cheap from the lives that are lost to maintain it and to keep it. But without it, we'd really be up the creek. So this is why we hope and pray that our leaders will keep that foremost in their minds. And when we were there this last time, I had been to Washington, D.C. before, but this trip really opened my eyes to that beautiful capital city. And there's nothing more beautiful than Washington, D.C., unless it happens to be Charleston. But Washington, D.C., with all its government buildings and what it stands for everybody that lives in it, and people coming from other countries to be there, and thinking that a bomb could drop onto that country and do what Berlin, Hiroshima, it's a fragile thing. Peace is a very fragile thing. And it's worth what it cost to keep it foremost in our, and depending on God, I'm a great one to believe in God watching us. And you hope he stays on our side. God's going to get pretty sick of some of this stuff one of these days. And we're going to find that we're not quite as great as we like to think we are.
Or blessed.
Or blessed. We are so blessed.
Mom, what advice would you give to a young person today thinking of joining the service?
I don't know if that's a fair question, Kathy. I'm thinking about going into the service when you're needed as a person at that particular time. I see so many from the valley here, from the San Joaquin Valley, going into the military because they can't really get a better job. It's the best job they can afford. And that seems like a thin, of course,
a thin what?
I don't think I would advise. I would be putting myself in a vulnerable position to say, I don't think I would advise girls to go into the service as it is now, unless we are faced with another dilemma that would require everybody. They've got as much right and as much duty as the men have. But I like to think that our men in this country can protect the women and protect the country. And I would not, I am glad that none of my daughters are in the military. And I would probably be criticized from hell to breakfast for saying that, but it's the way I feel.
And Ma, what did you learn about yourself through the military?
What a question! I don't have anything to compare it to. I don't know how I would feel if I had not gone, if I had stayed right there in Rockhill, South Carolina, and married some other boy that talked like this, like I did, and had 6 or 8 little, you know what South Carolina people were called? they're called sandlappers. North Carolina were Tar Heels. I don't know why South Carolina was sandlappers, but that was a little, out here, California people were prune pickers. You know, every state has its little thing. So I don't like to think I would have stayed right there and not seen. I've traveled a lot during the time I've been on my own, both with your father and you kids too. But the little girl across the street came over after I'd taken a trip someplace, and she wanted to write a little essay on it, and we sat here and we talked, and I started counting up the foreign countries I had visited, and it had been 38. I hadn't realized it had been, but it was wonderful. I wish I had traveled more.
Do you think that your years in the military catalyzed that capacity for travel? Or
I think it did. Of course it did. It lets you know there's something out beyond these lines, the border here and the border there. And things happened in other countries that we should know about. Oh, yeah, I remember being in Machu Picchu in South America. And seeing what those people who were civilized and building things before our country was ever discovered, how they could fit stones together without a paper thin between them. And they're still using some of those irrigation things that they built. So if things continue to progress like they did from those thousands of years as that happened, and all over the world, I mean all over, good, bad, or lackadaisical, it's they've done a good job.
Meaning we have a very rich, the human record is a very rich record.
It's the only record we've got. It's the only one that we could build on.
And when you travel, you really appreciate.
Oh, yes.
That is an enriching experience in
it
itself.
Is. And during the time I was traveling in Europe, South America, I went to a part of Africa, just up in the northern part. And yeah, I've covered some, but I'd be so proud. And now there are times when the Americans, the ugly American has done some things we're not all that proud of. So I would maybe give it another thought. I would love to go and see their country, but I wouldn't want to go and be booted out of there because we don't like you.
Exactly. We're quite a spectrum. We're quite a broad spectrum of qualities and intellect and capacities, huh? It's 2016 right now. It's June of 2016. It's a presidential election year. And based on what you have, if we're thinking of your military service in FDR, followed by Truman, and then on, do you have just any comment on the reflection of the first, not only as the first black man, African-American man, become president of the United States, but now we have perhaps the first woman. Well, certainly the first woman will be seeking the office. But she happens to be countered to Donald Trump, who is the first businessman to run for a presidential position. Do you have any comment on the zeitgeist of the time?
I can only say that in this great big land of ours, there are people who would fill that position admirably, honorably, and efficiently. I don't think they've showed up since FDR.
That's a wonderful comment.
I remember him. I remember the day he died. And I was in Hawaii, and I called in. I was at the barracks when came over the radio that the president had died, and I called the OD's office right away. Boy, those flags had to come to half-mast and all that sort of thing. And he was a man of the hour. He was the man, a God-sent man, I really feel. And no, I don't know what's going to happen in this next election. I don't like what we're going to have to make a decision of. You?
All I know is we're living in very uncertain times.
Mm-hmm.
So we have just a few more questions, Mom, focused on the military active service.
I'm all focused.
Your active service. And if you're thinking back to when you were approved to join in, to become a wave,
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about that you were in the first, you were part of the first women.
Yeah.
So you were like, there was no precedent. You were the precedent. So talk about how much time you were given to prepare to leave, and what kind of guidance were you given just knowing that women and talk about the meaning of wave and so on.
Well, we were told, of course, from the time signed up and all that we were kind of starting a precedent. There would probably be other women following us, but this is the first time we'd had women going into the military, such as we were doing. They'd had nurses from all along, but we were the first to be the same, sailors and whatever. And it was fun, it was exciting, and we were told to be discreet. I remember after we got to Hawaii, an officer came there, and she met us all in the room, the recreation room over there, and she said, "We ask you girls to just be discreet. We know you have all the desires and the opportunity that other people." What did I listen to her? What she's saying is they're expecting us to go out here and sleep with every sailor. That's what. And I said, I kind of resent that. She said, "You do?" I said, "Yes." I said, "We are adults, and we are not. We'll conduct ourselves the same as if we were home." And I think I'm speaking for every girl in this room. So there was not a case of pregnancy. There was not my roommate got married to a wonderful man whose family lived in Hawaii. They were wealthy people. They were importer-exporters. And so we all envied her because she's living there yet. Mm-hmm. Lives up on Oahu. But we were given some expectations of what might be expected of us. But heck, we were like on curfew. In most places they were stationed, you had to be in the barracks at 10 o'clock at night. And there was not a whole lot of time to horse around and kick up your heels if you were inclined to do that.
Right. So because there you are, there's men stationed there, you women, there couldn't be that many of you women.
Oh, no, there were very few, and we were popular as all get out. Oh, boy. Once a week there were dances there at the recreation room, and I was never that was at the time of, what did we call it? The Big Apple started and the other dancing that was so crazy.
Were you still doing the jitterbug?
Jitterbugging and all that. Connie was a great dancer. My boyfriend Eddie was a great dancer. I was a lousy dancer. So Eddie and Connie would dance together, and I would dance with Frenchie. Frenchie was her boyfriend was like me. We'd just dance around slowly. And boy, they were at the up and down. It was great. It was great.
So say a little more about that the officer was indicating, your sexual behavior, obviously.
Yeah.
And so how, I mean, did they issue you guys contraceptive?
Oh, good
Women?
gosh. Are you kidding? No.
They didn't issue women.
They didn't expect the women to misbehave or jump over the no. It was expected. And I know I'm not naive. I was not naive then. And I remember one girl that was there in the barracks after another batch came and they started putting some people in the upper levels and the girls were doing some things in addition to hospital work and office work, and there were some doing mechanical work even. They were doing, like the Queen Elizabeth did. She drove a truck, you know. But this girl was kind of a dyed blonde. She was kind of heavy. Anyway, a picture appeared of her. One of the boys had it, and he had my boyfriend look at it, wouldn't know if I could identify her. And I looked at it, and I thought pretty sure it was this floozy from up then, but I wasn't sure. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't know who it was. But
what kind of picture of it?
She was standing out there without a stitch of clothing on out on the beach. And so the word got around that she was, and the other girls just didn't have anything to do with her at all.
So it really wasn't this sexually liberated adventure.
No, it wasn't that at all. It
was discreet. In your experience, there was a lot of discretion.
A lot of discretion. As a matter of fact, I was at a meeting here after, and I met another woman there at that meeting. She'd been an ex-slave. And we were talking about that very thing, about how different it is now as it was then, and how straight we were compared to the girls now. It's what we hear and think of and all that. And she said, well, I was a virgin when I went into the Navy. And somebody said, what were you when you came out? And I thought, so I kept my mouth shut. That was none of their business. And I was very ladylike, and I was very discreet, and I had a beautiful relationship with this boy named Eddie that I adored, and he adored me. And that's the end of that. What else are you asking me?
Talk about the clothing, becoming a wave, and what does WAVE stand for, Mother?
WAVE, Women Accepted for Voluntary Emergency Service. Not auxiliary service at all. Yeah, and when we were in training there in Oklahoma, Stillwater, we were fitted for our uniforms. Our blue dress uniforms were designed by Maine Bochet. I mean, they fitted, and we had to be fitted
and
for those.
Maine Bochet was a
designer
from Paris,
Italy, I think. I'm not sure, but I know one of the officers was so proud. She said, never thought I would wear your clothing designed. But anyway, we had to be fitted. The length of the dresses the skirts had to be exactly right, and we had to walk around the room with these clothes on, and if they didn't fit, they were pinned, so they did fit. So we looked good, and we took care. So we were given 2 dress uniforms in blue, one in dress white, and the dumb things we wore to work were seersucker, a one-piece dress thing. But we
one-piece dress with a little bow here, or
well, they had a bow there, and they had sleeves to here and a zipper in the side, and they had to fit right, too.
So they were all tailored in a way.
Yeah. We didn't look like we out of the.
Did you feel pleased to be in your uniform?
Oh, we were proud. We were so proud. And in Atlanta, at Rich's department store, they had uniforms, and you could go there and buy all you wanted to after you got your first allotment. They didn't keep supplying. You bought them after that. And I had my hat, with the blue cap that I wore. Anyway, I'm not putting it on because my hair's not that way. But we all had enough enough changes of uniforms that we're not, we wore this little hat. And we wore it with a flare. Hair had to be off our collars,
Yeah.
But that was with the blue. We had the hats that was in my, like that. They were really ugly things. They were really, really ugly. But it had U.S. Navy on them.
Hold that up to the camera, too. There you go.
And that was, as I said, I'd just been in swimming in the Atlantic Ocean. My hair was still sort of wet. And we went down, my two brothers were there, and my mother was with us. So she wanted a picture of the three of us in uniform. And that's what she got.
That's nice.
Yeah.
When the ship first was coming into view of Hawaii and the day of arrival, what was that like? What were your first
after
impressions?
3 days out there on the, and turning off the lights at night and trying to sneaky poo around and get a little smoochy and stuff. When we got to where we could see, what the heck is that mountain called there in the
That's not Diamond Head, is it?
Diamond Head. We saw Diamond Head. And of course, you for several hours, you're still sailing toward it. It doesn't suddenly it's there and you're on the. But we all stood there. Not sure the ship listed over, but we all watched the island come closer and closer and closer. And it was exciting because we knew we were going someplace we hadn't been before.
Yeah.
And we were lucky.
And so when you docked and you put your feet on Hawaiian, that territory at that time, you were in a new land. What was that like those first days? Did they give you a lay or was that not part of it?
No. All the girls were lined up. All that, well, didn't I had a picture someplace of the ones that arrived there on that ship. It wasn't that many. But we had to line up in our little marching order and march off that ship and march onto a bus that took us to where we were going to be. And it was what are those huts called?
Quonset.
Quonset huts. And we had a little bunk to sleep in. And everything we took was in a musette bag on our back. It was like a backpack now that kids would use. An extra uniform and
Toothbrush.
all that sort of thing. But we had a barracks bag that we packed everything else we took, and it was delivered to where we were going. Yeah.
Do you remember that it's the first time you'd seen palm trees, or had you seen them before?
Well, in in Florida, you have this, and South Carolina has the palmetto trees. It looks like them. I'd seen. But, and then they started posting right away. They started posting where each girl was going to be stationed because there's several places to work there on the island of Oahu. 4 islands there, and it would say the following 4 girls will appear with all your belongings at 0700 hours on Wednesday. And there you were sitting off there. And it waited and waited and waited. And I kept my everything washed and cleaned up. And finally, we were about to run out of places to go. And the little thing listed these people that would be going to Hilo. Hilo? Where in the heck is Hilo? What?
So you landed in Honolulu.
Well, oh yeah. Anyway, we did go on a propeller airplane from there down to Hilo. And that's where we were going to be stationed. And I loved it.
Wow.
Yep.
You'd been on an airplane before?
Yeah.
How did you adjust to living and working conditions in the tropics?
Well, the climate there on the Big Island, especially, there was always a breeze. It was always, every afternoon at 4 o'clock it would rain, and you learn to you just adjust to it. And we lived in the barracks. This is the first time I'd been in a barracks as such, you know. And the CBs had built these barracks for us.
What's a CB?
Construction battalion, those sailors that would do that kind of work. And they had these ironing boards they had made for us and covered them with old sheets or something. And they'd taken nails and driven, and then underneath were all these nails. You'd put something on there to iron it, and we had to learn right away that those nails had to be driven out of there. They thought they were doing a good job for us.
Were there enough people there to do the job you were assigned to, or was the unit understaffed?
Oh, no, it was assigned. As a matter of fact, we women went down to replace there was a young boy had been making this plan of the day, typing this thing up every day. He just hated it. And he wanted to get out of there and go where there was some action. So sure enough, just when we got to Hilo, and Connie was a storekeeper, and she was going to be stationed out there and some in the personnel office. And Robinson, you will be in the OD's office. That was a choice place to be. And I went in, he said, "Oh, am I glad to see you. I'm leaving. Here's your typewriter. I'm out of here." He hated typing and that sort of thing. But it was good duty.
It was a good assignment for you.
Oh, a great assignment, yeah.
Did you keep that same assignment the whole war? Your whole
well,
period?
yeah, the thing, it included other things. The thing I didn't like to do, when there'd be a court-martial, and I'd have to go and take it in shorthand and then type it up for the OD and the CO to sign. And that's the first I realized that there were differences. This one little young-looking boy had been, our clothesline had been stolen at night. Sometimes we could wear any kind of pants or underclothes we wanted. We were not wearing those like the wax had wore.
That was not military issue.
No, and so we had fancy feminine uniform, clothes, underwear. And they started disappearing off our wash line at night. And somebody discovered this young little old sailor had been stealing them and hiding, just as to have a feeling thing. And he had this personal, anyway, had a court-martial for him. And he was given a bad conduct discharge because of that. I never cried over anything that happened until that happened to me. And he had to bring all the stuff that he had stolen off the line, and they put it on a big table there. Most of the girls had their names embroidered in their things or sewn in or whatever. So several things Connie had. I didn't. I had stuff that, but heck, mine was stuff off from J.C. Penney and stuff. He wasn't stealing. He was just getting pretty stuff.
The lingerie.
Yeah. And I said, "Connie, you've got to go out there and identify." "I'm not going over there and say that's my bra and all that stuff."
Wow. But it touched you, the court.
Oh, yeah. It seemed unfair. I mean, that's the first experience I ever had with what's it called, a personal.
You mean a gender preference?
Yeah,
or
that. He was probably just gay. And we never heard that word at all. I'd never heard of gay or that.
Yeah, homosexuality wasn't discussed.
No, pretty stupid.
Yeah, and that could have been a fetish.
Oh yeah,
That was, but he was probably a young and innocent boy.
He was such a little blonde, innocent-looking kid. Yeah, I cried about that, and I told my boss, the OD, I said, "I think this is ridiculous. That kid being sent home with a bad conduct discharge." He said, "That's the rule." And that's when I learned.
When you were there in Hawaii, you were stationed in Hilo, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
For the whole
Naval Air Station.
Hilo Naval Air Station.
Yeah,
for the whole
time.
That was it.
Yeah, but I got several trips over to the Kona side. Nothing was over there, but they grew coffee over there, and a good place to go for a weekend if you get away. And when my brother's ship came in up at Pearl, And he wrote that their ship was going to be in there. And I told my boss, I thought, my brother's ship's coming into Pearl. Well, we'll have to get you up there. And I went up and spent the weekend up there. And Harry and I had pictures of us.
And was that year 44, 3?
Oh, that would have been in 44, most of all of 44 when I was there.
And what'd you do on your days off?
Played tennis or go into town, go to a movie. Didn't take much to entertain us.
Do you remember a movie that was out at that time?
Yes, National Velvet with what's her little name?
Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor and the horse and all that. And it came there, and I saw it the first time right there at that.
In Hilo?
Mm-hmm.
So did you get R&R, or you didn't need R&R?
Didn't need it. No, if you wanted, because we had on and off liberty. Every other day you had liberty from noon until curfew.
Oh.
And my two friends, Eddie and Frenchie, and two other guys had rented this lovely house out on the beach there that had been occupied by Japanese people and had been taken over. And so, yeah, they rented it. The city had taken it over, and it was completely furnished. And heck, on our Liberty Days, Connie and I had the same Liberty Days, and Frenchie and Eddie. And we'd go out there and we'd cook, or half the pictures I brought home were from out there. Just loved it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was
beautiful. You were in a Japanese garden in a way.
Yeah, it was
paradise.
They had one of those where you build the fire underneath, and it heats the water in your tub.
Wow, that's a classic Japanese little stove kind of thing. Were you always able to get your mail? Oh, yes.
Oh, the mail was right on. We had those Liberty letters that you'd type them up or write them. They were in the size of a sheet. Then they would be reduced down to about this size, real small.
You mean you'd fold them?
No, we wouldn't fold them. We'd put them out. They'd be mailed that way. You'd address them. And I wrote to 4 brothers, and Lord knows how many friends from all over the world, and you'd write free on the outside. You wouldn't put a stamp on them if you were in the military. Got free postage.
And did you write a personal letter every day?
Oh, I wrote more than one. I kept letters. My typewriter was hot.
You did a lot of writing.
Yeah.
Of correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what did that do for you? Because I'm sure not everybody wrote that much correspondence.
Oh, no, not as many people. And I got more mail than most anybody because I had, of course, my family. They all wrote, and friends that I had from back Rockhill. But I was getting mail all the time and writing a lot.
Didn't you write to a lot of GIs?
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, my gosh, yeah. I've got them in a box out in the garage. Someday you might look at them.
Just random guys that you would have met?
I met, you meet people wherever you go. And they'd always say, I'd like to. Another thing they did early in the war, when they were being transferred by open truckloads were going down to Fort Jackson in South Carolina, where they trained them. These guys would write their names and addresses on a little paper and wrap it up, put it in a gun shell, that they'd pick up. And as they'd drive through town, they'd see a girl walking along, and they'd throw these out. Write to me, write to me, write to me. And I wrote to a lot of people. I got acquainted with a lot of people. Buck was laughing at me one day. He said, someday you're going to pick up some of those and write to them. It's going to turn out to be a black soldier. I said, so what?
They
never did. But I really got acquainted with a lot of people.
That's an interesting story.
Well, it's true.
Did you have running water?
Where?
In Hilo?
Yeah. I took a shower every day. Hot water. We had a washing machine out there. We changed our linen in every Thursday or Friday or they'd throw our sheets out in the hallway for the master at arms, the girl that did that, to come and gather them all up. If a sheet was stained or soiled, you'd put it in a different style so she could treat it.
Where was the washing machine?
Out a covered thing, out of the barracks, a big covered, and the washroom lines were out there.
Huh, so a washroom and lines, but it's an outhouse.
Didn't have a dryer, but we...
How long was your shift?
You mean where to work?
No, how many hours was the shift?
We'd all have to go out for the colors in the morning.
What time is that?
And we'd go out. That was at like 7:30, I think. And then we'd rush to the mess hall and have breakfast. And then be at your desk by 8:30 to 5.
Did you have a lunch break?
Oh, yeah. We'd go swimming.
You'd go swimming in the
That
ocean?
would be a lovely pool there. So I would give up my eating time. I've got a picture someplace of me. I'd come back from being swimming all that time. I wasn't a good swimmer, if you remember, but I sure got wet. Anyway, we'd get back there, and golly, I'm hungry. So the chief that was in the office I was with called the mess hall and said, "We have a visiting officer from Honolulu. Could you please send over a tray?" And here came this little cook with this tray with this lovely, and they put it on the desk, and I sat there eating this lovely meal. And he said, "Is it for you?" And I said, "Yeah, it's for me." And somebody took a picture of me and put it in this paper there. We had a little paper from the tray. There I was. I've got a picture of it around somewhere, eating, my hair wet.
And just how many days off in any given week or month did you have?
It was really like a 7-day week, because all these plan of the day had to go out Saturday and Sunday the same. So yeah, you were there.
But how did it go? 2 days on, 2 days off, or
no, evening, afternoon. On our Liberty afternoon, we would be at the office there till 8:30 until noon, and then on our off day we had the afternoon. But we had to be back at the barracks by 10, so we'd go out to that lovely house that Eddie and those had rented, and golly, we had a good time. And we had a couple of guys that worked delivering vegetables and fruit and meats to the officers' club, and they would bring chicken and everything if we'd let them stay and eat.
Very cool. So you had Liberty every other day.
Every other day, on and off Liberty. Mm-hmm.
Were there any special regulations because of where you were serving? Any restrictions or particular regulations relevant to your position in the Pacific?
Not really. We knew what was expected, and we knew we didn't wear pants. We all had slacks that we go on our off-duty things, but for work we were in uniform.
Because I've seen you in military issue slacks.
Well, you could buy them. They were not issue. You could buy them.
I see.
At the ship store.
I see. And wear them only off-duty.
Only off-duty, yeah.
How did the citizens of Hawaii feel about American service personnel?
Oh, they like I told you earlier, they're absolutely delighted in our being there, because they knew that their island could have been taken the same as Pearl, and the entire group of islands could have been overrun completely.
By the Japanese?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were pleased.
They were very pleased.
Did you spend any time with the local people?
As much as I could. That's what I was talking about, we were invited to their houses for parties a lot. And then I lived in poi, and And then they were great for dancing and singing and doing their island thing.
These are native Hawaiians.
Yeah, yeah. And like I was saying earlier, the male dancing was very, it kind of frightened me. I didn't want to stay there and watch them.
A little
Them low.
sensual and suggestive, huh?
Oh, so suggestive. Yeah. And the women loved it because that was the way they did their courting.
Of course. It's a mating dance
Yeah,
in a way, huh?
yeah.
But it made you a little nervous.
Yeah, like I was such a prude, you know. I was such a prude.
Were you?
Yeah.
You know, describe a little bit of what the typical day would be like. I know you said you'd get to the office and take the inbox tray and go out and harvest flowers.
That's after I got there and and we'd have to go to, there's a word for it when you gather, muster. We'd have to muster for the raising of the flag. And then there was a recording of the reveille thing. And when that's open, then you run to breakfast.
Did you salute or anything?
No, you didn't salute, listen. Then we'd go and have breakfast and then go to your duty station, wherever. And that was expected. You were to be there and you were there. And lunchtime came and it was staggered more or less. There was somebody in the office all the time. And when some sailor was caught with booze, they were not, you couldn't bring booze on, but they were caught a lot.
On the base.
On the base. But when they brought them straight to the OD's office. And the OD, my boss, would confiscate the bottle. Sometimes it's expensive stuff they had bought someplace and brought it. Not that Southern Comfort that was awful. But I'd have to go with him. There was sleeping quarters there for the whatever our officer was on duty. I'd have to go with him into the restroom and he'd pour the water. He'd say,
pour the liquor out.
Pour it right down the john. Then it had to go into the log of the ship's log. You had to write that up.
Did you ever taste that contraband?
No.
Oh.
I wasn't. I drank stuff with Southern Comfort. But we'd go and bowl. We bowled a lot.
You and who?
Well, on your off-duty thing, you go and there were teams that bowled, and you'd get a Coke and they'd pour half of it out and fill it up with Southern Comfort. Then you'd sit there and drink that stuff. And we didn't have bowling shoes. I had to go next door and buy some socks from just so I could bowl and slide in them.
Did you ever fall down?
Oh yeah.
Well, if you couple socks,
of course, I still had on my uniform.
Huh?
I was wearing my uniform.
And drinking
Southern Comfort.
Southern Comfort and bowling in socks. That's kind of a funny image.
Won the war anyway.
Thinking about VE Day and VJ Day, where were you on those days?
On VE Day, that's when the day that they invaded Europe. They had been accumulating.
Who's they?
Our guys. They had been accumulating in England. It's one for every square inch. There was a soldier or something there, and it was kept very, very quiet. And General Eisenhower had not let it out at all. It was a very big secret as to when E-Day, that would be the invasion day. And I was home on a Liberty. It was in June. And Mom and I were out on the back porch and the radio was going.
1940 what?
It was the year just before.
Was it
Must have been 43. 43 maybe. And of course we listened to that. And then the reports started coming in of losses, and because so many of the invasion people were killed making that invasion. And then when VJ Day was in Japan, and I remember that so well, that was just after the bomb dropped. I think 2 days after the Japanese surrendered, and that was called VJ Day, Victory over Japan.
So the day of invading Europe was, what was
That was, I think that was June 6th. I'm pretty sure.
1943,
Yeah,
June 6th.
yeah.
Were any of your family members in that
Betty,
invasion?
you know Betty, my sister-in-law, her brother was killed.
At that invasion?
He's buried there now. And when Judy was back there on a trip, she and her daughter that you met, they went back there and they went out to the cemetery where, you know, it's like
Arlington.
Arlington.
Is that the one in
big.
France?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of
A lot of Americans. Yeah.
So hundreds and hundreds of men died.
Yeah, yeah.
And you were on the back porch with your mother.
With Mama. We were out there when they announced it on the radio.
And what happened inside of you? What did the two of you do?
Well, it was a big relief because we'd been waiting for that for a long, long time. We'd been waiting to know that was going to happen because until they invaded, we were not going to get out of that war at all in Europe.
Germany had taken over France.
Oh,
now.
gosh, yeah.
Right. And then Eisenhower, of course, it turned the war because he started to push back the Germans.
Well, it wasn't easy because they were entrenched up there, and they had where this Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
They had mined it.
Was that the Maginot Line or?
No,
different?
the Maginot Line was the line that the French had made. They thought that nobody could ever break the Maginot that line, but they did. But anyway, they coming ashore, there were many of those landing boats that were blown up, and the
because they mined the beach.
Yeah, and then the soldiers, the Germans, were on the cliffs with their machine guns and their other armament. They had planned to win that war.
It's awful. Was anybody you knew or in the family that was in Normandy?
Well, other than Betty's brother.
Mm-hmm. So that invasion of Europe, that was the invasion at Normandy.
Well, Normandy was, yeah, but one of the beaches was called Normandy Beach, Omaha Beach, you know, because it's a whole,
right,
and
right.
wherever they happened to land, because these great big landing boats were out there as thick as they could go, thick with the soldiers with their guns and splashing ashore and getting killed before they could get there. Or as you'd stagger up on the beach, there's somebody going, hopefully drag them up further so there'd be someone who had landed safely already. It was, like you said earlier, war is not pretty. It doesn't end up like some of those movies that they show.
And so, and VJ Day, where were you on VJ Day?
I was in Hilo.
When Japan fell?
Yeah, that was just that we had heard about this bomb dropping. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing, this atomic bomb. What on earth? And we didn't have TV, you know. All the news we got came by radio. And
what time of day was it?
Must have been during, well, there was, you know, several hours and changes between Hawaii and Japan, so I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember because that meant victory in Japan?
Yeah.
Right.
Victory.
But it meant when you understood, because that was top secret about the atomic bomb.
Yeah, that's the first we heard of it.
And it was utter devastation.
Oh, gosh, we couldn't imagine anything that could be that powerful.
What was the feeling that went through you when you realized?
Relief that the war was, because I was worried about Jack. He was out there helping storm those islands. Japan had armed and established those islands, Midway and Wake and Guadalcanal and Saipan, all those islands. Their people had been there, families had been there. They knew that if we came a war, that was still going to be Japanese territory. All those islands were going to be theirs. And they were told that if they're captured, they should kill themselves because, and Saipan had some cliffs. And when Jack was helping to go onto the beach there at Saipan.
Military landing in Saipan.
Yeah, they could see women jumping out of these things with their babies. They'd rather commit suicide, jump from these cliffs where they'd lived down into and drown themselves and their babies, rather than be captured from what they'd been told would happen to them if they were there.
So obviously propaganda.
Well, it was propaganda. And they had lived there. They thought they were safe. Their government, their Japanese government, great Hirohito and all that, take care of them.
At the end of those victories, what did you do to celebrate?
The morning they had signed the war ended. Across from our barracks was
the European War was over.
That had reached the part where they were cleaning up and sending people home and all that. But across from our barracks, a driveway and a whole lot, was a fire station over there. And all the guys that were on duty in the fire station came boiling out of there. They were going to come over and celebrate with the waves over there. Boy, they were sent right back to their little cubby holes where they lived. And we stayed right there, and we'd yell back and forth at each other. War is over. Going home tomorrow.
Wow. A lot of jubilation.
Oh, yeah. And that picture of the sailor that's kissing the nurse, remember? That's been reproduced and reproduced and reproduced. That happened in San Francisco, I think, didn't it? And, they celebrated all over. People were sick of war by then. Yeah. We'd been living on ration stamps and...
People, the citizens.
Everybody, citizens and service people too. You get one pair of shoes and they'd take your little shoe stamp. You can't get any more. They'd take that stamp. Buy sugar, they'd take the sugar stamp. You were issued. I've got some in of the ration books that had the stamps for what was rationed.
For every month? You got one every month? Or
no, you got it, I don't know how long it covered. But
there
were several sheets in
shoes.
It. Huh?
They gave you a stamp for shoes.
Yeah, well, you'd have to use your stamp for shoes.
Wow. What were those stamps called? Ration stamps?
Ration stamps,
But it was like when that word came out, it's like the guys just wanted to embrace you girls.
Oh, they wanted to celebrate in the street.
Did you girls feel the same way?
Well, if we were smart, we would have opened that door and gone. They closed after curfew. Our doors were locked. But the girl on duty, the master at arms, had the keys to that in case of emergency. We could have gotten out of there. But knowing now, we would have had those doors open and we would have been out there celebrating too.
Right.
Now.
And then just how long after that day did you demobilize?
Oh, they started right away. They wanted to get the people home. It was expensive. And so depending on how many points you had, depending on how long you'd been there, I've been there as long as anybody, how long you'd been in the military at all, it counted up your stamp. That's why there's one picture of us leaving. There was just one small plane of us that were leaving on that one day. And we had leis around our necks, and we went out and got on the propeller plane to fly up to Honolulu, and then we came back by ship. And the Eddie had gone out to be with me as long as he could until we got leis. And I was sitting in the airplane looking out the window at the operations building, and there stood Eddie, the last one standing there watching that. So, of course, I bawled halfway to Honolulu.
Did you kind of know in that moment that that was the end of a love affair?
Well, it wasn't actually, and he came to the East Coast to see me after that. That's another story. That has nothing to do with this.
Did you consider at all staying in the
No, I
military?
did not. Some of the girls did.
Uh-huh.
And 2 or 3 of the girls I knew did, because they said, I know if I stay, I will be promoted fast. And there was one girl who had been our master at arms, it's called, taking care of the barracks and all that sort of thing. And she knew that, and she did. I kept hearing from her for a while. She was made chief, one of the first women chiefs in the Navy. You know, just it's the enlisted rank, but, and she stayed in until she retired. I guess I lost contact with her after that.
So many women.
Well, I wouldn't say many, but they had an opportunity to stay if they
Yeah.
wanted to, because we had proven that there was a place that we could do a good job.
That's right.
Yeah.
And ever since there's been a place for women in
Yeah,
the military.
right.
That's all we have, Mom, in these particular questions. You've done really well. Is there anything you want to say relevant to the honor flight right here, right now? Or
Oh, you know, I can't.
I mean, after all these years, let's
Yeah.
just look at that for a minute. It's been
I cannot.
70 years since what you're
Yeah.
telling me
Yeah.
the story about
Yeah.
has happened. And then to have been invited with Al Perry and the honor flight here in Fresno to go back.
I just can't think of a nicer thing that they could have made available to the veterans. And to have that thing so beautifully planned, so every little moment was done so well. And going to the things we saw, many people have said to me, what did you enjoy most of all? And I don't know. Everything we did was, I think being out there at the change of
The Tomb of the Unknown.
yeah, at Arlington. And it rained that day, and we all had, whether it was rain or tears, we never knew. That was such a wonderful experience. And the talk that Al Perry made the night we had the dinner, that he got serious and he talked about, I would love to have a copy of that. He did the most beautiful job of being serious about what
it meant,
Yeah.
World War II.
And every one of those men in that picture in there, every one of them has a different story of, like me telling a bunch of lies, and about them telling their war stories.
It changes a life.
It does.
It informs a
It
life.
should change a life. It should give you a meaning of what is really important.
Well, you know, Mom, what we'll do next is we'll call up and have a meeting of what was it, 4 women, and we'll have a little tea and have a few more.
Do you happen to read? There was an article in the paper. One of them wrote just a couple of days ago, and she was saying just the way I feel about that.
One of the women waved.
Yeah, the
on
woman,
flight.
because started off, there were 4 of us, and one had to drop out because she had the attack of something or other. So there were 3 of us that went. But this woman wrote so much the way I feel, and I'm going to write to the paper as well as, I don't have her address or anything. Her name is there, but I don't think you track her down.
Helen Condit was her name.
Yeah.
Well, Mom, thank you very much. This has been extraordinarily rich.
We are filming this on June 18th, 2016, and we just noticed, ironically enough, that 74 years ago today, the first work on the Manhattan Project began that developed into the atomic bomb, which is unbelievable.
74 years.
And I'm only 28.
That's the beauty.
That's it.